some of us here at King's Chapel have been abiding with Reggie for these last couple of weeks in our poetry discussion group. And it is amazing to have this be the coda of that time that we've got to spend with you. So I appreciate you being here. You referenced several times that we are in a church. And it occurred to me to ask, is there a gospel of Reggie? Right?
Yes.
So, you go to divinity school and they enjoin you to preach the gospel, right? The good news. And I wondered, as you shared with us so much of your work, is there a good news that underlies that work? Is there a good news that you find and can detect that's threaded through your work that you want to sort of share with us?
Hopefully, I do. Hopefully, people heard it. I'm bullish on this creature, this Homo sapiens thing, and constantly trying to figure out. I guess my gospel is to ask questions and figure out what this means, if it means anything. I don't know if there's a thing of ultimate work, but I know that I believe that whatever work we have is the work we're going to get each other, and to fight against what it is in our cultures and in ourselves that teaches us to constantly devalue them, to turn you into a thing acted upon in my eyes instead of a person related to. And so I'd like to think of my work as being driven by that desire to bring us closer together. And it's a ministry to me in a sense because I get into those spaces where I'm small. Where I'm looking at this vast world through a pinhole and need a broader, larger perspective. And so hopefully, even if we can just get this kind of stuff for a moment, right? A glimpse of something better, something other, then I think these moments are worth it. That's my thought.
I want to open it up. David?
Where should I find a microphone?
Ready. Well, if you say your question, I can repeat it too.
Yeah.
So it's not a short question.
Okay. Well, let me give that to you. Be careful about the speaker here.
Okay.
If we get the feedback of it.
I'm a transplant originally from Louisiana. And after many weird stops along the way, I find myself here on Beacon Hill. So that's my framework. So I have two things, use your phrase, frame things, that I want to question about. The first one is an observation, and the second is a question. The observation is that you used a lot of very nice emotional words for me. Atoms, Big Bang, DNA, molecules, stars, y'all, you didn't put y'all in that, so not so. And love 2 or 3 times. So that's my observation. It caused me to think something, and your delivery was magnificent. Thank you. Now the question, what is the meaning of life?
You said you're gonna ask.
David, it's better if you hold the microphone for speaking.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. I guess that reminds me of to answer that. It's a story, Persian story about how the great God looked upon into space, and space burned into a mirror, and the mirror dropped down to the earth, and the people who on the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces, and the people each grabbed one of the pieces and looked and we saw their faces next to the face of God and says, I have the help the face of God. And someone else goes, no, I have the help the face of God. No, I have the face of God. And it spoke that the great God wept because what he wanted them to do was to put the pieces together. Then they would understand all of them on the face of God. For me, it's the idea that when we talk about the meaning of life, that's something we create together, right? No one individual might have the answer, but if we talk and we get with each other and we say, okay, what does this mean? Perhaps it means only what we make it mean, right? I don't know. If there is an ultimate quote unquote meaning or purpose or anything like that, I have no idea. I have a sense of something, but I have no knowledge. So us meeting together brings us to what the meaning of life, if it does in fact have one, might possibly be. However, that doesn't mean just because we haven't done ultimately, there are things which are less. Right? There are things that give us greater meaning, connection, connectivity, being with one another. We are inextricably bound to one another. I have done some teaching in prisons. And let me tell you, do you know prisons, of course, being a place of punishment? Do you know how you punish a person in prison? Isolation. Isolation. In a place that's built for punishment, the way you punish someone is to place them in isolation. Think about that for a moment, right? We're talking about a place in which people have their food taken, their possessions stolen, they're stripped to nothing but numbers, they're sexually predated upon, and they're subject to random violence. And to punish a person in a place like that, you take them away from other human beings. That means something. We're inextricably bound to one another. We need each other even when we're being crappy to one another, right? So I like to think that maybe in the searching of that is where we might find what all of this is. Right? And life, of course, to me being something which goes on and goes on, meaning is expansive. So we'll add something to it like a Lego and build that house of meaning together.
Thank you.
Sure. More questions?
Other questions?
Hey, Michelle.
Kind of a random question. Have you heard of Morton Hoover?
The writer, of course.
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, what you said reminded me of that.
Ah, thank you. Yes. Thank you. Anyone else? Please. Yes.
One thing I would like to know is about where your next appearances and performances and so forth are. I know you don't really have much on your website about that.
It's a shame, isn't
It is. I wonder if you could fix that.
it? I could hire somebody.
I'll help you.
Okay. I just get busy, just don't do stuff. But actually, I'm going to be at the Lizard Lounge, which is in Cambridge. But it's the 25th anniversary of the Lizard Lounge. It's a place that has done a lot of poetry and independent music here in the Boston Cambridge area. So I'll be there tonight. So celebrating 25 years, the silver anniversary of the Lizard Lounge. You know, it's an interesting since I've got these, my stuff now on Google Calendar. Even I don't know what I'm sort of doing next, quite doing next. But let me see. Next week is school vacation. I think so. School vacation. So my wife being an educator, her and I are going to be doing some planning for some stuff we're doing on anti-racism. But I'm going to be working with a gentleman again named Guy Mendelow. We do something to look for that's called radio plays. And it is a performed podcast in which we use a string quartet to also to push some of the music that we're doing. I'm going to be working with the Handle Highland Society. I've worked with them before and written some text with them. I'm going to be working with them at the come up soon, pretty soon. And that's going to be at the Kennedy Museum, Kennedy Library. And so that's coming up relatively soon as well. So that should be in. So it's a few things going. And thank you for asking.
I'm serious. I mean, really.
I'll try. Please. Please. Any other questions?
For our next question, I wondered about as you were talking about our connection to one another.
Yeah.
And finding meaning and how that works. It made me think of the conversation between Zeus and Prometheus.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were giving us that conversation, that made me think of our story from Genesis about the Tower of Babel, right?
Yeah.
And how God sees these people kind of creating this, and maybe need to slow this down, right?
Right.
And I wonder if you could talk about I think we sometimes have. It's a puzzle making meaning of that story.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you take the people who are cooperating together to build this tower and sort of throw a wrench in the works? And I have some theories about that, but I wonder if you.
That story has always troubled me.
Mhm.
It's always trouble, being a person of language, right? Um, and I'm not quite sure what to make of it, right? But it's I don't know, some may say it's the arrogance of man, how dare man think that he can blah. And others are like, well, was this a stumbling block to make human beings stronger? But so much of what happens with our species happens because of our inability to communicate effectively with each other. So anything that gets in the way of that would seem to me to be antithetical to us having unity. I've never really understood what to make of that, except in me interpreting it in the most kind way. It gets back to that idea of we're meant to muscle through it,
Mhm.
right? We're meant to struggle through it. We're meant to, this thing that wishes to build itself to the transcendent has to come through more than our ability to put brick on top of brick on top of
Mm.
brick.
Mhm.
It has to come more from the materials in which we can fashion our civilization, right? It has to be more than just that. You can't just get there through your technology. You can't just get there through you can get there, maybe get into some idola, some fake sense of that, but you don't really get there. You don't transcend strictly by the usage of the materials that you have at hand, but by the materials that you have to create from the inside. And that means you've got to wrestle it.
Mhm.
You got to work through it. Just like Jacob at Penel, you ain't gonna get this easy blessing,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
And it's the recognition that when you do get this blessing, you might limp for the rest of your life, right? So be careful what you wrestle with,
Mm.
but understand that this is going to cause you discomfort and it's going to cause you pain.
Mm.
So you have to have a faith that what's at the end of it is worth the grappling.
Mm. I think there's something too about a beauty in multiplicity, right? So as you say, generous reading says, oh, what if there's more than one language? What if there's more than one way of communicating? And then we've got to figure out the focus shifts, right? So when everybody speaks the same language, then the emphasis does become on those bricks. If you read the story itself, there's a lot of paragraphs spent on these bricks, right? And not a lot of paragraphs spent on the people that are put one on top of the other. But the idea that when people are split and they're speaking different languages, it reminds me of how your work partakes of so many different languages and styles and inflections, right? And genres. Um, and that perhaps in having to encounter one another across those different languages
Yeah.
and styles and genres, we have to pay more attention. The focus becomes less on reaching the sky and more on looking toward one another. The view shifts from upwards to outward. You know, we've got to focus more on each other. And I think that's something that your work partakes of. Thank you a lot. Yeah, I appreciate that. Other questions?
Yes.
I'm wondering if you could share some of the more profound experiences that led you on this path to calling, if you will.
The question was about if I could maybe share some of the more profound experiences that led me on this. Well, I trace this back forensically to my great grandfather. Well, speaking of someone earlier about this, who was illiterate, but I didn't know that. And he would tell stories, and he would also tell stories and make up songs, and they were mnemonic devices that he could for him to be able to remember stuff. And I'm really glad you asked this question. He was a railway worker, and he was the individual who was the caller on the railroad. So he was the one who would sing aloud for people to be able to hit, the spikes too. And one of his songs that I remember, this is a moment that I think it really happened for me. My brother and I was visiting my great grandparents. We knew them both, my maternal great grandparents, because in Mississippi, there was a tendency to have children younger, right? Because of the agrarian culture. And one day, my brother and I, we were visiting my great grandparents. We were left there for the summer with my grandparents and my great grandparents. And we're in this home that my great granddad, Robert, had built. And the walls were really thin, and we were on my brother and I was in this on the mattress. And I don't know what anyone knows about Mississippi, but they don't throw away anything, right? So you had like 8 mattresses that are piled up on top of each other. So it's like when you get on top, you sort of move it around on the bed. And my great grandfather was in the kitchen. And he had slaughtered a pig some weeks before. He was in the kitchen making bacon. And he was singing one of his railroad songs. I am working now all day long, Lord. Here comes the sun, traveling tracks of sky. Oh, Lord. I came later on to realize what he was doing poetically. You couldn't have talked about that before, but I came to understand it. But at the same time, I heard him do this before. But this is what made it different. I heard my grandmother singing a song in the front of the house where she was shucking peas or corn. And she was singing one of her gospel tunes, which I had also heard. And it was, I want Jesus to walk with me. Yeah, I want Jesus to walk with me. All the long life's pilgrim journey. I want Jesus to walk with me. As I said, we'd heard both of those songs before, but for some reason this time, they both came together. Right? And it was, I can't do it because it's mixing in my head as a multiple melodic thing. But if I was to say it for you, it was sort of like, I am working, Jesus, walk with traveling tracks of sky, all along, Lord. And my brother and I turned to each other. We didn't have language for that moment, right? I've often written about it, like maybe this is what the duende that the Spanish speak about, this thing that grabs you by the ankles. And we just looked at each other. And I knew there was something about what was happening there that I think for myself right now, it's been a lifetime of trying to travel back to whatever it was in that moment, right? That somewhere between the sacred and the profane, but also attempting to find what is sacred in the profane. And I look at that and I see these little things in my life. My father, for much of the time of my upbringing, was a cop, and my mother being a devout, Bible-thumping Christian evangelical Jehovah's Witness, right? And so I go back and forth with what that means, right? I study all of these things from around the world of us trying to get knowledge of human beings doing. But I'm so, my mother has called me a DNA, which is a damn near atheist. but I'm so comfortable in the houses of faith that I'm a member of Unitarian Universalist Church, and I attend and I love what the better aspects of what religion can do for us. And I trace that back to that sort of moment that made me figure that there's something communicating, that things aren't so cut and dry. And for me, that's where I think I got it from. It was interesting because my brother and I, we talked about that once, and both of us had clear memories of that moment. And I said, man, this moment changed my life. I think it set me on my path. And he goes, yeah, that was some killer bacon. It was right. It was some killer bacon. But I guess that's the reason I'm a better poet. He's a better cook, right? As I said to someone earlier about the sermon that we listened to today, we took what we needed from that, right? And what I took from that moment was a path forward for thinking about these things that made us. So I don't know how profound that is, but it certainly is what happened. Thank you both. Okay.
Indeed. Thank you.